Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final day, day 28 of 28 days to master level chess tactics. We are on the final day of deflection and on the final day of this course. Congratulations if you made it this far. I'm going to give you two positions with medium difficulty for deflection, and then we'll make a summary. So in this position, it's white to move, and you can pause the video now. All right, so first off, in terms of a summary, you want to look at the general factors, and the first thing that jumped out to me in this position was all the piece activity and all the contact between the pieces. It is white to move, but black has some rather crazy threats against white, namely this back rank threat, and it looks like white has to do something very forceful to deal with it, because he can't bring the king over, he could bring the knight back, but you really don't want to do something that's kind of backwards when you also have a weak king that you can attack yourself. All right, so you'd look at moves like queen check, knight back, and also knight to e7. All right, in this position, the correct move is actually knight to e7, and it's a deflection tactic because it either draws the rook away from the first rank, and then you could take the queen, or if the knight comes, then that opens this bishop diagonal and a quick checkmate. So let's see what happens. So for example, if the rook comes, then you simply just take. And now if he checks, then you can also just bring your rook back. If bishop comes here, you're also threatening a check and a checkmate. So if the bishop came here, you wouldn't want to check here, or you wouldn't want to go here because it's not check. Because that would be a checkmate. So be careful of those kind of basic tactics in these more complicated combinations. You just take the bishop and you'd be fine. Basically, you got a queen for a rook. All right, so if the knight takes, then you have this sudden check, queen to g3. Now, at first, I thought this would result in checkmate, but then I saw he could play knight to g6. But of course, you just take the queen, and it's a similar position. You basically won, it looks like you have a queen, a rook, two minor pieces versus a rook, two rooks. So yeah, it looks like you're down a rook and a minor piece. So a little less material than the other one, but otherwise it still works out. All right, and of course if he takes here, then you get a checkmate on f7. All right, so in the game, he just took with the rook and gave his queen, and the game was over. But you need to calculate these more complicated lines in the end. All right, so let's make a general conclusion. So basically, when we are looking at these kind of complicated combinations, you want to start with the general specifics, general to specific. And the general thing is kind of open your mind to possible forcing moves. And it's kind of like, I would think of it as like a funnel where you have this wide open ability of moves, and then it just gets funneled and funneled to hopefully the correct solution. All right, let's apply that idea in this second position. All right, this position is white to move, and you can pause the video now before I say anything about it. All right, at first glance, it looks like it's a little simpler, but actually, though there's less forcing moves, there is a lot of calculation in a position like this. You notice that there's contact between the bishop and the queen is also covering the c3 knight, but also generally, the first thing you should notice is the undeveloped black pieces. Look, the king just sitting in the center, and white is just ready to play check here, but he needs to be careful because if he played check and then take the rook, then you need to calculate to the end of the line, and he would just take your queen. So it's going to be a little more complicated than that. All right, this is actually a game played by Alekhine, I think in the 1935 World Championship, and he found this deflection move, which is actually really brilliant. It's bishop to b5, check. And now if the queen takes, then rook check works. And if the bishop takes, then it's suddenly not threatening the queen. It does hit this rook, but let's see if the bishop takes here. So you do get this check, and it looks like at the end of the line, the bishop can take the rook. He already took a bishop, keep in mind. But if the king goes here, then you actually get a pretty quick mate then you would check on c5. You take here, and now white is threatening mate, so he actually can't take the rook, and you'd be up at least an exchange, and you still have a raging attack. If he doesn't protect against the check here, you can just go to f8 and then take, and there's a lot of problems. All right, and also, so basically, if he goes to d7, then you take, and now if he took there, then you would get the checkmate, so you'd have to defend against that, and the queen could come in c5 and also threaten checkmate on d5. So a lot of problems in that line. All right, so let's look at queen takes. So that's actually the better option, and it looks like that's what was played. So we see check, check, and if the knight comes in, you get an immediate checkmate. And notice also if the queen comes in, you have one more check, and then the queen has to give itself up, and you get a checkmate anyway. And so basically, why does this happen? It's because of the crazy undevelopment of black, and also his king sitting in the center. So that general idea of, oh, I see a king in the center, he's undeveloped, and this is how you find these kind of crazy combinations. All right, so the deductive logic of seeing bishop to b5 can be found not necessarily by learning a pattern. That was not my purpose in this course. My purpose was to focus on applying a thought process in ever more complicated positions and ideas, and just seeing if we can use forcing moves from general to specific to find these kind of ideas. It's not easy, it is hard, but of course, the more practice you get at it, the better you will be. All right, so let's just make a general conclusion about this position. So basically with deflection, it is a deflection because bishop to b5 is a double deflection, because if the queen takes, it suddenly doesn't defend here or these lines. All right, let's see. So if the queen takes, then he gets a pretty quick checkmate. And if the bishop takes, then he's suddenly not threatening the queen, and you can get a checkmate hopefully on c8, or you could get your queen into f7 eventually after you take the rook. All right, so these positions were somewhat difficult, but I just wanted to cover the final idea of the thought process. And as you learn patterns, it should really be a secondary thing that you do when you study more complicated tactics. You should not try to rely on pattern recognition. And actually, I'm going to make a video about that with an idea that I've come up with over this course as I was solving these positions and thinking about how can I improve my ability to find more complicated tactics. And a lot of the problem that I saw was just using pattern recognition and relying on that, and you really can't when things get more complicated. All right, so congratulations for finishing this course if you stuck with it, and I'll see you in future videos. Thanks for watching. Don't fret if you got the solution wrong. There will be another time.